The most important people in your life can appear on the worst day of your life. Emily Carter had no idea how true those words would become as she sat alone at a small table near the front window of Willow Bean Café in downtown Portland. Outside, a light spring rain tapped softly against the glass, turning the city lights into blurry streaks of gold and silver. Inside, the cafe was warm, crowded, and filled with conversations that somehow made her loneliness feel even louder. She glanced at her phone again. 7:42 p.m. Her date was now 42 minutes late. The message she had sent earlier remained unread. Her coffee had long gone cold. She tried to convince herself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe traffic was terrible. Maybe his phone battery had died. Maybe something unexpected had happened. But deep down, she already knew the truth. He wasn't coming. Emily forced a small smile whenever someone looked her way, pretending she was waiting for a friend or enjoying a quiet evening alone. But the truth sat heavily in her chest. This date had taken weeks of courage. For nearly 5 years, her world had revolved around responsibility. Work, bills, grocery lists, school forms, doctor appointments, endless sacrifices. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to do something for herself. Her best friend had convinced her to create an online dating profile. At first, Emily laughed at the idea. Then she hesitated. Then one lonely evening after putting her son to bed, she finally agreed. The man she'd been talking to seemed kind, thoughtful, funny. He'd told her she deserved happiness. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. Instead, she sat alone under soft cafe lights, feeling foolish for believing that maybe life was ready to give her something good. Around her, couples laughed over pastries. Friends shared stories across wooden tables. A young man walked toward the door carrying flowers. Emily looked away before the sting in her eyes became visible. She reached for her purse. It was time to leave. She had already wasted enough hope on one evening. As she stood, her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. She grabbed it immediately. One message. Just 6 words. Sorry. Can't make it. Good luck. Emily stared at the screen. No explanation. No apology worth believing. Just 6 careless words ending weeks of conversation. For a moment, she couldn't move. The embarrassment was worse than the disappointment. She felt invisible, disposable, like someone had glanced at her life and decided she wasn't worth showing up for. Taking a slow breath, she slipped the phone into her purse and headed toward the exit. She promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Not tonight. The rain outside had become heavier. She reached for the cafe door. Then suddenly the entire room seemed to shift. The bell above the entrance chimed loudly. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Emily looked back over her shoulder as the door swung open and a tall man stepped inside from the rain. But he wasn't alone. 4 children rushed through the doorway ahead of him, their excited voices filling the cafe. And before Emily could understand what was happening, all 4 of them spotted her at exactly the same moment. The 4 children froze for half a second after spotting Emily. Then, as if they had all received the same secret signal, they raced straight toward her. Emily barely had time to react before the smallest girl reached her first and wrapped her arms around her waist. The other 3 crowded around her immediately, smiling as though they had just found someone they had been searching for all day. The entire cafe fell silent. Emily looked down in complete confusion. "Oh my goodness," she said softly. "I think you have the wrong person." But the children only laughed. The little girl looked up with bright blue eyes. "You look nice," she announced confidently. Emily blinked. "Thank you." "See," the girl said to the others. "I told you." The 3 siblings nodded as if this somehow proved an important point. Several customers nearby smiled at the unexpected scene. Others exchanged puzzled glances. Emily carefully looked toward the entrance, expecting a worried parent to rush over. Instead, she saw the tall man who had entered behind them. He looked to be in his late 30s. Rain droplets still clung to the shoulders of his dark coat. His expression carried the exhausted patience of someone used to managing chaos. Yet even he appeared surprised by what was happening. For a moment, he simply stood there watching his children surround a complete stranger. Then he walked over. "I am so sorry," he said. Usually they introduced themselves before adopting people. A few customers laughed. Emily could not help smiling despite everything that had happened earlier that evening. "No harm done," she replied. The little girl finally released her grip. I am Sophie. She pointed rapidly around the group. That is Ava. That is Noah. That is Liam. Emily greeted each child. Their excitement seemed genuine and immediate, as though they had known her for years instead of seconds. And I am Emily. See, Noah said triumphantly. She has a nice name too. The man shook his head with amusement. I am Ethan Walker. Emily recognized the name instantly. Almost everyone in Portland knew it. Ethan Walker was the founder of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country. News articles described him as brilliant, private, and impossibly successful. Yet standing here, he looked less like a business leader and more like a tired father trying to keep 4 energetic children under control. Before Emily could respond, Liam accidentally bumped into a nearby chair. A paper cup sitting on the table tipped over, sending iced tea across the floor. The child immediately looked devastated. I am sorry, he whispered. The cafe employee behind the counter hurried over with towels. Emily knelt beside Liam. Hey, she said gently. Spills happen. Nobody is in trouble. Liam looked at her uncertainly. Really? Really? She handed him a napkin. The best thing we can do is help clean it up. Relief spread across his face. Within seconds, all 4 children were helping. Ethan watched quietly. Something in his expression changed. It was subtle, but Emily noticed it. For the first time since entering the cafe, he seemed completely at ease. Then Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve and pointed directly at Emily. Dad? She said with absolute certainty. This is the lady I was telling you about. Ethan frowned. What lady? Sophie smiled. The one from my dream. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emily looked from Sophie to Ethan, waiting for someone to explain. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck and gave an apologetic smile. Please do not pay too much attention to that, he said. My children have very active imaginations. I do not have an imagination, Sophie protested. I had a dream 3 nights ago. Ava immediately nodded. She told us about it at breakfast. Noah joined in. And again at lunch. And again before bed, Liam added. Emily laughed softly despite herself. It was the first genuine laugh she had experienced all evening. Sophie crossed her arms. Because nobody listened. Ethan sighed. Apparently not. The tension dissolved, and for the first time since receiving that painful message from her date, Emily felt the weight on her chest begin to ease. The children continued asking questions before she could even think of leaving. They wanted to know her favorite color, whether she liked dogs, whether she preferred pancakes or waffles, and whether she knew how to build blanket forts. Ethan eventually managed to guide everyone toward a large table near the back of the cafe. To Emily's surprise, Sophie immediately pulled out an empty chair. You can sit here. Emily hesitated. She really should leave. Her son was staying overnight with her mother, but she still had work early the next morning. More importantly, spending time with strangers was not something she normally did. Yet something about the children's excitement felt impossible to refuse. Just for a few minutes, she said. Her smiling faces instantly celebrated as if she had agreed to something much bigger. A fresh cup of coffee appeared in front of her a few minutes later. Ethan had quietly ordered it. Thank you, Emily said. You did not have to do that. Considering they practically kidnapped your evening, it seemed fair. She smiled again. The conversation flowed more naturally than she expected. The children told stories about school projects and soccer games. Emily shared funny moments from raising her son. Several times, she caught Ethan watching the interaction with an expression she could not quite identify. It was not curiosity. It was not surprise. It looked closer to relief, as if he had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had briefly forgotten about it. Nearly an hour passed before Emily realized it. The embarrassment of being abandoned at the cafe had completely disappeared. Somehow these 5 strangers had replaced one painful memory with something unexpectedly warm. Then Noah asked a question that changed the mood. Do you ever get lonely? The table became quiet. Emily glanced at him. The question seemed innocent, but she noticed Ethan stiffen slightly. Emily thought carefully before answering. Sometimes, she admitted. Everybody gets lonely once in a while. Noah looked down at the table. Dad gets lonely too. Ethan immediately tried to redirect the conversation. All right, new topic. But the children exchanged knowing looks. Emily noticed it. There was clearly more to this family than appeared on the surface. Before she could ask anything, Sophie reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I need to show you something, she said. She unfolded a crayon drawing, and slid it across the table toward Emily. The smile slowly disappeared from Emily's face. In the center of the drawing stood 5 figures holding hands. 4 children, 1 man, and beside them was a woman with long blonde hair. Above the drawing, written in large, uneven letters, were 3 words. "Welcome home, Emily." Emily stared at the drawing, unsure whether to laugh, feel touched, or be completely alarmed. The colorful crayon picture was simple, the way most children's drawings were, but the name written across the top sent an unexpected chill through her. "Welcome home, Emily." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Sophie looked proud of her artwork. The other children watched Emily expectantly, as though they had been waiting all evening for her reaction. Ethan, however, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sophie," he said gently, "we talked about showing that drawing to people." "I know," she replied, but she needed to see it. Emily looked up from the paper. "When did you make this?" Sophie thought for a moment. "About 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks? Emily asked. "Before you ever met me?" "Yes." The little girl answered so confidently that Emily did not know what to say. Ethan let out a quiet breath and leaned back in his chair. "I should probably explain." His voice carried a mixture of embarrassment and exhaustion. After their mother passed away 3 years ago, the children all handled it differently. Sophie became very interested in signs and dreams and things she could not explain. Sophie immediately corrected him. "Because sometimes dreams mean something." Ethan smiled patiently. "And sometimes dreams are just dreams." But even he did not sound completely convinced. Emily studied the drawing again. The woman in the picture did not really look like her. It was simply a blonde woman standing beside the family. Yet somehow that felt even stranger. The drawing had existed before tonight, before the cafe, before any of them knew she existed. "It is still a beautiful picture," Emily said softly. Sophie beamed. The conversation gradually moved on, but Emily found herself paying closer attention. The children were cheerful, energetic, and deeply attached to their father. Yet beneath their laughter, she sensed something missing. They often glanced at Ethan for reassurance. They sat unusually close to him. It was as if they were afraid of losing another person they loved. As the evening continued, Emily learned more about them. Noah loved science. Liam was obsessed with baseball statistics. Ava carried a sketchbook everywhere she went. Sophie seemed to notice details that everyone else missed. The more they talked, the more Emily forgot that these were strangers. They felt surprisingly familiar. Eventually, she checked the time and realized nearly 2 hours had passed. "I really need to get going," she said. For disappointed faces immediately appeared around the table. "Already?" Ava asked. "I have to work tomorrow morning." Ethan stood. "We should let her escape before you all start negotiating." The children laughed. Emily gathered her purse and prepared to leave. For a brief moment, she wondered if this would be the last time she ever saw them. After all, life was full of random encounters that disappeared as quickly as they arrived. Then Ethan walked her toward the door while the children remained at the table. Rain still fell outside. The city lights reflected across the wet sidewalk. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "You have no idea how much tonight meant to them." Emily smiled. "Honestly, tonight probably helped me more than it helped them." Ethan looked at her carefully, almost as if he wanted to ask something. Before he could speak, his phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the screen, and the warmth disappeared from his face instantly. Emily noticed the change. Whatever he was seeing, it was not good news. Emily pretended not to notice the sudden change in Ethan's expression, but it was impossible to miss. Only seconds earlier, he had seemed relaxed. Now his jaw tightened as he stared at the screen. The phone continued ringing. For a moment, it looked as though he considered ignoring the call. Then he answered. "Hello." His voice became careful and controlled. Emily could not hear the person on the other end, but she noticed the way Ethan's shoulders slowly stiffened. Rain tapped against the cafe windows while the warm atmosphere around them suddenly felt distant. After less than a minute, Ethan ended the call. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and forced a smile. It was a good attempt, but not good enough. "Everything okay?" Emily asked. Ethan hesitated. "Not exactly." He glanced toward the table where the children were laughing together. His eyes softened immediately. "But it is nothing they need to worry about tonight." Emily nodded. She understood that answer. Parents often carried burdens they never allowed their children to see. "I should go," she said gently. Ethan looked as though he wanted to say something else. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. In case you ever need anything. Emily laughed softly. Anything? Perhaps not anything, he replied. But if 4 children somehow convince themselves that you are part of their family, I feel responsible for making sure you can contact me. She accepted the card. Their fingers briefly touched before both quickly pulled away. It was an ordinary moment, yet neither seemed entirely comfortable afterward. Emily slipped the card into her purse. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Emily. She stepped into the rainy Portland evening and headed toward her car. During the drive home, she kept replaying the strange events of the night. The abandoned date, the children, the drawing, the dream. None of it made sense. Yet for the first time in months, she found herself smiling while driving through the rain. The next morning returned her to reality. Emily's alarm sounded at 6 o'clock. Bills waited on the kitchen counter. Her apartment felt small. Her old coffee maker made an unpleasant rattling noise. Her son, Caleb, needed help finding a missing homework folder before school. Life resumed exactly where it had left off. By afternoon, Emily was working her shift at a neighborhood bookstore. During a quiet moment, her coworker Megan approached holding a tablet. You need to see this. Emily glanced up. A local business article filled the screen. The photograph showed Ethan Walker standing outside a downtown courthouse. His expression was serious. The headline immediately caught her attention. Walker family custody dispute intensifies. Emily frowned. She quickly read the first few paragraphs. According to the report, a legal dispute involving the children's maternal aunt had been growing for months. The woman was petitioning for partial custody of the quadruplets, claiming Ethan's demanding career prevented him from giving them enough attention and stability. Emily stared at the article. Suddenly the phone call from the previous night made sense. The exhaustion she had seen in Ethan's eyes made sense too. This was not a small problem. This was a threat to the people he loved most. Then she noticed something else. The article mentioned that an important hearing had been scheduled for the following week. And for the first time since leaving the cafe, Emily found herself genuinely worried about a family she had only known for a few hours. The following week seemed to move both slowly and all at once. Emily tried focusing on work, on Caleb's school schedule, on the dozens of ordinary responsibilities that filled her days, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan and the children. She told herself it was simply concern. Anyone who had met those 4 bright, lovable kids would worry about them. Yet every time she remembered Sophie's drawing or Noah's question about loneliness, the feeling became harder to dismiss. On Thursday afternoon, while organizing a display of new arrivals at the bookstore, Emily's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Then she noticed the unfamiliar number. Hello, Emily. The voice was immediately recognizable. Ethan, I hope I am not bothering you. She found herself smiling before she realized it. Not at all. There was a brief pause. The children have been asking about you every day. Emily laughed softly. That sounds dangerous. You have no idea. For the first time since they met, Ethan sounded genuinely tired. Not the exhaustion of a long workday, but something deeper. Actually, he continued, I was wondering if you and Caleb might like to join us for lunch this Saturday. Emily hesitated. The invitation surprised her. Are you sure? Very sure. The children would never forgive me if I did not ask. Before she could answer, another voice suddenly appeared in the background. Tell her yes. Then another. Dad is terrible at invitations. Followed by laughter. Emily could not help smiling. All right, she said. We would love to come. Saturday arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. The lunch took place at a large city park overlooking the river. Caleb immediately bonded with the quadruplets. Within minutes, the 5 children were running across open grass, inventing games and laughing as though they had known each other for years. Emily sat on a picnic blanket beside Ethan while watching them. For a while, neither spoke. The peaceful scene felt surprisingly comfortable. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting us. His gaze remained fixed on the children. I needed this today. Emily looked at him carefully. He seemed different from the confident businessman she had seen in newspaper articles. More human. More vulnerable. The hearing is next week, isn't it? She asked. Quietly. Ethan nodded. Tuesday morning. How are you holding up? He released a long breath. Honestly, I do not know. His eyes followed the children across the field. Everyone sees the company, the headlines, the success. Nobody sees what happens when I go home and spend half the night wondering whether I am doing enough for them. Emily understood that feeling better than he realized. Every parent carried those fears. You love them, she said. That much is obvious. Ethan smiled sadly. Apparently, love is not always considered sufficient evidence. Before Emily could respond, movement near the parking area caught her attention. Several people holding cameras had appeared near the edge of the park. Ethan noticed them immediately. The warmth disappeared from his face. Reporters, he said quietly. The cameras began turning toward the children. And for the first time, Emily saw genuine worry enter Ethan's eyes. Emily followed Ethan's gaze toward the reporters gathering near the parking area. There were only a few of them at first, but more seemed to be arriving every minute. Cameras pointed toward the open field where the children were playing. The laughter that had filled the afternoon suddenly felt fragile. Ethan stood immediately. I need to get them out of here. His voice remained calm, but Emily could hear the tension underneath it. The children had not noticed the reporters yet. Caleb was teaching Liam and Noah a game, while Ava and Sophie chased each other across the grass. For one brief moment, they were simply children enjoying a sunny Saturday. Emily understood why Ethan wanted to protect that. As Ethan started walking toward them, one reporter called his name. Then another. Questions began flying through the air. Mr. Walker, do you have a comment about the custody hearing? Are the children aware of the legal dispute? Is it true your schedule keeps you away from home for weeks at a time? Ethan ignored every question. He continued toward the children. Unfortunately, the attention was enough. Noah turned. Then Ava. Within seconds, all four children had noticed the cameras. The change in their expressions broke Emily's heart. Their excitement vanished. Sophie immediately ran toward her father. Liam moved closer to his siblings. They had clearly been through this before. Ethan gathered them together and spoke quietly. Emily could not hear the words, but she saw him reassuring them. Then one reporter moved closer. Not aggressively, but close enough to make the children uncomfortable. Sophie grabbed Ethan's hand. Emily felt something inside her shift. She could have stayed out of it. She barely knew this family. Their problems were not hers. Life would certainly be simpler if she walked away now. Yet as she looked at the children, she remembered another little boy waiting for her at home. She remembered all the times she had wished someone would offer support when life felt overwhelming. Without stopping to think, she stepped forward. She moved beside Ethan and smiled warmly at the children. Hey, she called. Who wants ice cream? For heads turned instantly. Ice cream? Noah asked. Absolutely, Emily replied. I saw a stand near the parking lot, but I am pretty sure they only serve ice cream to kids who can win a race. The children immediately forgot about the cameras. We can win, Liam declared. Even Ethan looked surprised. Emily winked. Then you better prove it. Within seconds, the mood changed completely. The children laughed again. They started arguing playfully about who would finish first. The reporters lost interest as the family moved away together. For the first time all afternoon, Ethan seemed able to breathe. Later, after the children were safely occupied with towering ice cream cones, Ethan approached Emily quietly. His eyes held a gratitude that words could barely express. You did not have to do that, he said. Emily looked at the children and smiled. Maybe not. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then he asked a question that caught her completely off guard. Emily, would you consider coming with us to the hearing on Tuesday? Emily was stunned by the question. The sounds of children laughing and chasing one another around the picnic area seemed to fade into the background. The hearing? She repeated. Ethan nodded. I know it is a strange thing to ask. He looked down for a moment before continuing. But the children trust you. More than that, they feel safe around you. They have not opened up to someone this quickly in years. Emily did not know what to say. She had only known this family for a short time. Yet somehow they had become important to her. I am not sure I would be helping, she admitted. Ethan gave a small smile. You already have. Before the conversation could continue, Sophie appeared beside them holding a melting ice cream cone. Dad, stop making serious faces. Ethan laughed. I will do my best. Sophie then turned toward Emily. You should come on Tuesday. Emily blinked. You heard that. I hear lots of things. The little girl smiled mysteriously before running back toward the others. Tuesday arrived faster than anyone wanted. The courthouse stood in the center of downtown Portland, surrounded by reporters, attorneys, and people hurrying through busy sidewalks. Emily almost changed her mind twice before entering the building. Caleb was spending the day with her mother, and part of her still wondered whether she belonged here at all. But when she spotted the children waiting with Ethan in a quiet hallway, every doubt faded. The four of them immediately ran toward her. Even Noah, who usually tried to act older than the others, looked relieved to see her. "You came?" Ava said. "Of course I came," Emily replied. Ethan's expression softened. For the first time that morning, some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. The hearing itself lasted several hours. Emily remained seated in the gallery, quietly observing. She listened as attorneys discussed schedules, responsibilities, and family arrangements. The entire process felt strangely cold. Pages of documents attempted to measure something that could not be measured easily: love. Throughout the morning, Emily found herself watching Ethan more than anyone else. She noticed how carefully he listened whenever his children were mentioned. She noticed the concern in his eyes whenever difficult questions arose. Most of all, she noticed that every decision he made seemed centered on protecting them. During a break, the children gathered in a waiting room nearby. Sophie sat beside Emily. "Are you nervous?" Emily asked. Sophie shook her head. "No." "Why not?" The little girl smiled. "Because everything is finally happening the way it is supposed to." Emily laughed softly. "You still believe that dream?" "It was never just a dream." Before Emily could respond, Sophie pointed across the room. Ethan was standing near a window, speaking with his attorney. At that exact moment, he looked up. Their eyes met. Neither looked away immediately. Something passed between them that neither had been ready to admit before. A feeling that had been growing quietly since the night they met. Then Sophie leaned closer and whispered, "See? We figured it out before you did." The final decision came late in the afternoon. Hours of waiting had left everyone emotionally exhausted. The children sat together in the waiting room while adults moved in and out of conference rooms carrying folders and paperwork. Emily stayed close, offering quiet reassurance whenever nerves began to surface. Ethan remained calm on the outside, but she could see the strain behind his eyes. Then, at last, the attorneys returned. Ethan listened carefully as the outcome was explained. A few seconds later, he closed his eyes and released a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. When he looked up again, there was relief in his expression. The custody challenge had been resolved. The children would remain with him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Noah understood first. "Does that mean we are going home?" he asked. Ethan nodded. For children exploded into celebration at once. Laughter filled the room. Sophie threw her arms around her father. Ava started crying happy tears. Liam nearly knocked over a chair in his excitement. Even Noah abandoned his attempt to act grown-up and joined the group hug. Emily felt her own eyes become misty as she watched the family she had unexpectedly come to care about. Ethan eventually looked across the room at her. There were dozens of people present, yet somehow it felt like they were the only two there. He walked over slowly. "Thank you," he said. Emily smiled. "You do not need to thank me." "I do." His voice was quiet. "You showed up when you had every reason not to. You helped my children feel safe. You helped me remember that I did not have to carry everything alone." Emily looked down for a moment. "The truth is, you helped me too." Ethan's expression softened. "How?" She laughed gently. "The night we met, I thought I was leaving that cafe after one of the worst evenings of my life. Instead, I found 5 people who completely changed it." Before either could say more, Sophie appeared between them with perfect timing. "I knew it." Ethan shook his head. "You knew what?" Sophie pointed at both of them. "This." Ava, Liam, and Noah immediately joined her. "We all knew," Ava announced. Caleb, who had arrived with Emily's mother after school, looked around in confusion. What did everybody know? Sophie grinned. That they belonged together. The adults laughed, but nobody argued. Several months later, on a warm summer evening, 2 families gathered for a picnic in the same park where they had once shared lunch. The children played together across the grass while the sun slowly settled behind the river. Life was not perfect. There were still responsibilities, school schedules, work deadlines, and ordinary challenges. But there was also something that had been missing for a very long time. There was laughter. There was trust. There was a sense of home. Emily sat beside Ethan watching the children race across the field. Sophie suddenly appeared holding a carefully folded piece of paper. "I made a new drawing," she announced proudly. Emily opened it. The picture showed 7 smiling children and 2 adults standing together beneath a bright blue sky. Across the top, written in larger and neater letters than before, were the words Sophie had waited months to write. "Welcome home, everyone."